Hello again and welcome to another edition of Shed Talk. From the intro you can see that I've just come back from, or I've just been to a show, Northamptonshire BS Silver Show in fact, and I did put a video on just before this actually of the show. If you haven't seen it, I'll put a link across the top of the screen. Do go and have a look. It just covers some of the birds. There's not lots and lots of me talking. And in a previous videos I did the looked at show and showing, and I was asked to do a video on how I prep my birds for a show, which is what we are now going to cover in this video. So I'll start off by saying, I'm not an expert at prepping birds for shows, and I'll just go through the way that I show it. It will cover the sort of getting the birds out and getting them ready, washing the birds down, spraying, spotting, and how I deal with any damaged tails that aren't too badly damaged. So that's what we'll cover in this video. As always, if you enjoy the videos, don't forget to hit the like button and please do subscribe. It certainly helps the channel, and the more people that I suppose watch this type of video, the more likely it is that people will get involved in the hobby, and the better that is for the hobby. So please do hit the subscribe button, early notifications, just click on the bell as always. Right, well, let's have a look then at the showing of budgerigars, or prepping the budgerigar for shows. So this is the bird we're going to use as our demonstration, an opaline cinnamon grey. What I like to do is get the birds out at least 2 weeks before the day of the show. That way it allows the birds first of all to settle in the stock cage. I put them into a stock cage. At the moment I'm using the old breeding cages that are empty for it. I need to do some work on my stock cages, but I put them into a stock cage. It restricts the amount of movement they've got a bit, helps settle them, gets them more used to me rather than being in the flight, but it also enables them to put on a little bit of extra weight, just to build up that bit of extra weight, a bit of bulk, makes them look better in the show cage. You don't want them overweight, so you don't want them, the birds that have been in the breeding cage for the last 3 or 4 months, because they'll probably have a bit too much weight on them, but you do want them to have a little bit of weight. So I find about 2 to 3 weeks before the show is plenty for them to put on that little extra bit of weight. So the first thing I will do when I get them out is to wash the bird thoroughly. Now there are various ways of doing this. For me, I like to wash them in a bowl. The water that I'm using is warm to the touch, but not hot. So you don't want it, scalding. You don't want it boiling hot. Just so warm to the touch, so that it isn't going to be a shock to the bird, it either being too cold or too hot. So warm to the touch is how I like to describe it. I add to the water some baby shampoo, and I think we looked at that in a previous video. So just some normal baby shampoo, that way it's not going to irritate the eyes should any of it get into the eyes of the bird, and it should be safe for the birds. I on occasion, if a bird is really dirty, I will dunk it actually into the water, but on this occasion, as you can see, I'm just running the water across the top of the bird, and making sure I get the face and all of the body, all of the feathers, including the wings. Rub the water in so that it actually gets the baby shampoo into the feathers, making it helping to bring out the gloss in the feathers, helping to clean them thoroughly. And once I've done that, I will then rinse them off with the same water, so just rinsing them through with the water that's in there. If they've got any really bad marks around the face or around the head, then you could use a small toothbrush just to scrub those areas, or just rub them between your fingers and thumb, so just to make sure that it's thoroughly clean. It may be that if you've got one that has been feeding on carrot or on beetroot and has got a really red mask, or lots of blood from a pin feather that may have burst, that you might need to do this process a couple of times, but in most cases once is enough. So once you've washed the bird, I then like to dry it with a towel. Um, this way I can get most of the excess water off. A lot of people I know will then use a hairdryer to dry the bird down. So they may put them in a show cage and dry the bird down with a hairdryer. I don't do that, but if you're going to do it, make sure the hairdryer is on a low heat and not a really blast it with a really high heat. Because once again, you don't want to scorch the bird. You don't know how hot that bird's getting with the hairdryer. So on a low setting for heat for the hairdryer. For me, I find that if I towel them down, get rid of most of the water, then just pop them back into the cage, they look a bit bestraggled and you know, what the wreck of the Esper, I suppose. So, but they will dry off, and as they dry off, they will encourage them to start re-pruning their feathers and to bringing their feathers back into condition. I have never had a problem just letting the birds dry off in the cage. So I've not had a bird that's got too cold or suddenly become sick. But do make sure that where you're drying them is not in any draft and is not going to be too cold. So my shed kept it at a reasonable temperature. I think I set it so it doesn't drop below 18. So which is fine, or I find is fine, and the birds will dry off under their own heat. And like I say, it will encourage them to start pruning the feathers again and getting the feathers in a nice condition and nicely laid against the body of the bird. What I will then do is every day following that wash is I will spray them up until about 4 days, 3 to 4 days before the show, when I will then stop spraying altogether. So I'll spray them just with a normal bottle. Once again, make sure the water in the bottle is lukewarm, not freezing cold, so it's not a shock to the birds. But just a spray, heavy spray to begin with, and then gradually making it lighter and lighter as I get closer to the final day of spraying. And as I say, 2 to 3 days before, 3 to 4 days before the show, I will stop spraying them. That way it will encourage them, they will continue to prune and they'll get the oil back into the feathers. So again, should give them a nice shine to the feather overall. So I will then leave them then after that 3 to 4 days, just to without any more spraying. If you've got any tails that are been bent or the feathers look like they've been ragged, particularly if they've been in the stock cage for a little while, sometimes the birds will pull on each other's tails. Then what I will do in order to straighten those tails and get the feathers back nice and neat is I will run the tail under some steam from a kettle. When you're doing this, be really careful that you're not putting the bird in the direct line of the steam, because obviously you're not going to want to scorch the bird, blister it by putting it in there. If you've got your hand over the lowest part of the main lowest part of the bird, if you feel your hand getting hot, then move it away. That's the way I do it. The tail, it's going to be fine in the full blast of the steam. The tail is going to be fine. Then, as it's going through the steam, just stroke the tail, encourage the tail to go back into its normal shape, and it should be fine. Clearly, if it's lost the tail or if it's got a broken tail, this ain't going to help. But in most cases, it will help bring a slightly damaged, a slightly ragged tail back into reasonable condition, as you're seeing with this yellow face. The cinnamon I've been demonstrating on up till now, it had a reasonable tail, so it wasn't a problem. Then finally, spotting the bird out. Spotting the bird out is always the most difficult part, I find, of any of the show preparation. And that's just because, you're holding the bird in your hand for a reasonable amount of time. The bird can get fidgety, it doesn't enjoy it, and it will, probably have a go at you occasionally during the spotting out period. And it's also one of those nerve-wracking things about, am I pulling the correct spot? What you're looking to do is to go down from multiple spots, like you can see in this bird, down to just the 6 spots that it needs. So 2 main spots on each side and 1 half spot under the cheek, directly under the cheek patches. That's what you're looking to do. Try to identify the main spots. You will find, and in the case of this cinnamon, there were a couple of shadow spots that looked bigger than the main spot. But it will become obvious to the judge if you're leaving shadow spots in rather than the main spots. And the likelihood is it'll get marked down more for having a shadow spot than if you have a slightly smaller main spot. The shadow spots are lighter than the main spots. That's how you can tell that they are shadow spots. So those are the ones that you're trying to pull. I pull spots. A lot of what some people will do, and it's up to you how you do it, is they will pull the 4 main or 6 main spots, 4 main spots in particular, and then cut back the shadow spots completely. And then within a week, or just over a week, the spots will have regrown, or should have regrown, and therefore you're just left with the main spots. I don't do that. What I do is I will pull the shadow spots a couple of days or a day or 2 before the show. That way they'll be clear, and I just leave the main spots intact. Like I say, try either way, whichever suits you is best for you. Then do that. I've just found that this way is the way I do it. I will trim occasionally. You'll get some feathers that I've just got slight marks on them, and you don't want to pull too many of those, or they're particularly difficult, just won't come out no matter how hard you try. Then you can trim those with scissors. Be careful when you're trimming the mask. You don't want to just end up with 4 spots and no other mask. It still needs to have a reasonably full mask. So that's the spotting of the birds. Like I say, it can be quite stressful for yourself and the birds when you're doing this. If you're struggling, then put the bird back in and take 2 days to do it. I did it with this cinnamon. I put it back in, brought it back out the following day and finished it off just because it was getting difficult to see. The other thing you may find is that you think you've got them all, you put them back in the stock cage, come back the next day and have a look, and 1 or 2 of the shadow spots suddenly have reappeared or appear out of nowhere, so you may have to get them back out and do them again. So nothing wrong with that. So then you just have to leave them those last couple of days to let the spots settle. If you do it on the morning of the show, you may find that the spots don't resettle correctly, and it may look as if that you've only got 3 or 2 spots rather than the full 4, and the judge may struggle to see them all. So try and do it a couple of days or a day before the show is what I find is the best way of doing it. And then on the actual show day, you can either get them out of the stock cage, give them a once over the night before and put them in the show cages. A lot of people do that, particularly if they've got a long way to travel the next day. Alternatively, get them out in the morning and pop them into the show cage. They will settle on the way. I find they'll settle on the way to the show anyway. And they should, if you get there early enough, they should have plenty of time in the cage to do that final bit of pruning from your rough handling that you may have had prior to it. So, like I say, that's how I do it. Have a look at other videos that may be out there that of more, experienced breeders, and see how they prep their birds, and then find the way that suits you best. On the spotting side of it, I would say that that I think one of the reasons I think that people show more cocks than hens is the hen birds just go, when they grab out of your finger, they just bite harder than cock birds. So they're much more difficult to spot out, I find, than cock birds. But that's just me. You might find slightly differently. Anyway, so that's how I prep the birds for the show. I hope that covers all that you need for show preparation, and that you enjoyed the video. If you did, don't forget to like. Please don't forget to subscribe to the channel. And until the next video, please do stay safe and enjoy your birds.